The night was warm in Dubai, a city that glowed with golden lights reflecting off glass towers and marble streets. Inside one of the most exclusive restaurants in the downtown district, the air was filled with the quiet hum of classical music and the soft clinking of crystal glasses. It was the kind of place where every guest arrived in chauffeur-driven cars, and every detail was designed to whisper wealth and power. The kind of place where reputation mattered, where everyone wanted to be seen, and where the servers had been trained to perfection. Tonight, one of the wealthiest men in the region had booked a private table in the corner, expecting nothing less than flawless service. He was a billionaire with an empire spanning real estate, oil investments, and global holdings. Everyone in the city knew his name, but fewer knew his temper. He was the kind of man who believed that money gave him the right to demand absolute perfection, and those who worked under him, or around him, were often treated as little more than tools in his elaborate world of success. When the waitress assigned to his table arrived, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to remain calm under pressure. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with a modest uniform that seemed too simple for the glamorous surroundings. Yet her eyes revealed intelligence, and there was something about her silence that suggested she carried more within her than anyone around could see. She bowed politely, placed the menu before him, and waited with the patience of someone who had done this 100 times before. But the billionaire was already restless. He had been waiting for his favorite imported wine, and he thought she had taken too long to bring it. His irritation, born not from her mistake, but from his own arrogance, began to build. He leaned forward, eyes sharp, and then in a sudden burst of anger, he snapped at her in Arabic, his words harsh, his tone filled with superiority. The language rolled from his mouth like a weapon, sharp and cutting. His voice echoed across the restaurant, causing heads to turn, and the music seemed for a moment to dim under the weight of his anger. The insult wasn't just in what he said, but in the way he said it, as though he was certain she could never answer back. He assumed she was just another foreign worker, in a city full of them. Someone who might not even know the language, someone who would bow her head in silence and accept his cruelty without protest. But the billionaire was wrong. The waitress froze for just a fraction of a second, then straightened her posture. She looked him directly in the eyes with a calmness that caught him off guard. And then, to the shock of everyone within earshot, she answered back in flawless Arabic. Her voice was clear, steady, and confident, carrying across the room without a trace of fear. She did not shout, nor did she match his anger. Instead, her words flowed like a quiet storm, measured and sharp. She told him that respect was not something dictated by wealth, that being a customer did not give him the right to treat another human being as less than worthy, and that she had been serving him with professionalism and patience until he chose to humiliate her publicly. She reminded him, in perfect Arabic, that dignity was not for sale. The restaurant fell into silence. Forks paused midair, conversations stopped, and every eye in the room turned toward the confrontation unfolding at the corner table. No one could believe what they were hearing. It wasn't just the fact that she spoke Arabic fluently. It was the way she carried herself, unshaken by the billionaire's status, unafraid of the consequences. She spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had nothing to lose but herself, respect. And in that moment, it was clear who truly held the power in the room. The billionaire, stunned, could only stare at her. For years, he had built his empire on the belief that money placed him above others, that no one would dare stand up to him, especially not a waitress in a restaurant he practically owned through his influence. But now, in front of his peers, in front of strangers whose respect he valued, he was being challenged. And not by another billionaire or a politician, but by a young woman who spoke with the kind of courage he had never encountered before. His face flushed, and for a moment, pride and embarrassment battled inside him. He wanted to shout again, to reassert control, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the stillness in the room, the way the other guests were watching, silently judging. Maybe it was the quiet strength in her eyes, unbroken, unwavering. Or maybe it was the realization that his arrogance had finally been exposed in the one way he could not buy his way out of. For the first time in a very long while, the billionaire felt small. The waitress, seeing the silence, didn't press further. She simply gave a polite nod, as though concluding her statement, and stood waiting, calm as ever. The room remained hushed, as though the world itself was waiting for his response. And then, almost reluctantly, the billionaire's lips parted, and in halting words, he apologized. The word sounded foreign on his tongue, as if unused for years, but he said it. First in Arabic, then again in English, just to be sure it was understood. His voice was quieter now, stripped of arrogance, almost uncertain. A ripple moved through the restaurant. Some guests looked at one another in surprise, others smiled faintly, and a few even clapped softly, as though they had just witnessed justice in its simplest, most unexpected form. The billionaire lowered his eyes, suddenly aware that respect wasn't something that could be forced, bought, or demanded. It was something earned. And tonight, he had been taught that lesson by the very person he had underestimated the most. The waitress gave him a polite smile, as if to acknowledge his apology, and then carried on with her duties as though nothing had happened. She didn't bask in her victory, didn't linger on the moment. For her, it wasn't about proving superiority. It was about standing up for her own dignity. And in that quiet, powerful choice, she left an impression on everyone who had been watching. As the night went on, the billionaire ate his meal in uncharacteristic silence. His usual entourage noticed the change in his demeanor, the way he seemed distracted, his thoughts elsewhere. Later, when he left the restaurant, he did so without the usual arrogance, walking slower, quieter. Perhaps he would forget the details of the evening, but he would not forget the way it felt to be answered in the one language he never thought a young waitress could command so perfectly. The story of that night spread, not through headlines or gossip columns, but through whispers and conversations. Guests who had been present told their friends about the billionaire who had been silenced not by power, not by wealth, but by courage and fluency. It became one of those rare stories people told not because it was scandalous, but because it was inspiring. A reminder that respect is universal, that language has power, and that sometimes the smallest voice can echo the loudest in the right moment. And the waitress. She continued her life as before, her job unchanged, her uniform the same. But she walked a little taller, not because she had embarrassed a man of wealth, but because she had proven to herself that dignity is priceless, and that standing up for oneself is the greatest form of strength. In the end, the billionaire would go back to his empire, his towers, his endless wealth, but he would never forget the night when a young waitress answered him back fluently in Arabic, and for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his own arrogance crumble in the face of simple human courage.